know about our schools and what's going on inside. Come on and have yourself a seat. Now that's entertainment.
Hello, and welcome to the October 1996 program, Zoom In on Schools, a production of the Midland Public Schools Video Communications class in conjunction with MCTV. I'm Melinda Mesmer, your host, and with us today in the studio we have Kim Noe, Hillary Ferguson, and Amy Ryfisher. Our subject for today is the Reading Recovery Program. Thank you all for coming down to the studio. We appreciate it very much. And now let's jump right into our first question. What is the Reading Recovery Program?
Reading Recovery is an intensive one-on-one tutoring situation between a trained reading recovery teacher and a first grade student in the need of acceleration up to grade level in the area of reading. And we meet with the reading recovery student every day of the week for a half an hour each day. And during that time, we work on reading and writing and linking the two together and helping the child focus on their strengths and taking the child's strengths and taking them from point A to point B as quickly as we possibly can.
What age are the students that participate in the program?
First graders.
First graders? The cute ones? In which schools is this program available?
Reading Recovery is available in all of the elementary schools in Midland County.
Okay. Why doesn't every student receive this program in the schools?
Not every child would benefit from an intensive one-on-one situation such as reading recovery. So not every child would necessarily need that situation.
When and why was the Reading Recovery Program started?
Reading Recovery originated in New Zealand. Dr. Mari Clay was studying how children learn to read, how they become literate. And she studied all children, a range of students learning to read. And she noticed that the children for whom reading was coming most easily used reading strategies to help themselves get better at reading every time they read. They monitored their reading, and if it was tricky, they knew how to search the text for more cues and either fix up a mistake or figure out a new word. And her hypothesis, which I think reflects the genius of her work, was, can we teach those strategies to students for whom reading is more of a struggle in its earliest stages? And indeed, we have found that yes, we can. Help the children take on those strategies of our most effective and efficient first grade readers, and in turn let them read just as well as the good readers in their class. This country took on Reading Recovery through the work of the Ohio State University.
Sounds like a great program. How is this program improving the children's ability to read?
We look at each individual child as an individual learner, and we do, like Kim said, base his or her program on that child's strengths. And so from the very first lesson, the very first time we meet with a child, they're learning that what they're doing as a reader or a writer on whatever level they are, how smart that work is, yes, how much it's helping them become a better reader and writer. So they start to see themselves as a different type of learner, as a person who can be in charge of what he knows. Mm-hmm. And then that too carries back into the classroom setting too. So it's not only helping to improve their reading and writing skills, but because they've taken on kind of a different perspective on how they learn and that they can learn and that they do have strengths, that kind of carries over into all parts of their day too.
Right.
Their math and even things like behavior and relationships with other people. And so it's kind of interesting and gratifying for us to see how it improves all parts of their day at school.
I bet. All right, let's see what you've just described in action.
How about the word my? My. Excellent. Is that word in books that you read? Start with that out. Okay. letters with that L. You know all about that L now, don't you? Doesn't trip you anymore, does it? Good for you. All right.
My home is here, and so rabbit. Come back, rabbit.
A little bit of expression in your voice there, huh? Do you think the rabbit's going to come back? Not if he's smart, right?
Good. Have you learned any new words in your classroom lately, Kurt? Like, I'm wondering if you know book or look. Okay. What else? Quick.
Like,
Excellent. Okay, good.
it sees my... I see the hot bucket's claws. It sees my claws.
How are you doing? Some beautiful expression,
The
Kurt.
hot bucket roars at me. I roar louder. The hot bucket is running away. I think it is scared.
Like in or is. Yeah, good.
Go.
Yeah. When you hear that sound, you'd expect to see a G. Way to be smart about
How
it.
did you know don't make a G?
Because I can kind of tell what you're thinking, Kurt, because you're such a great first grade writer and
I
reader.
thought...
Not only does it sound like a great program, but it also looks like a great program. Tell us a little bit about what we saw.
First of all, with Anthony, Anthony's a hard worker, and it's really fun to be able to look up there and you know, see it from a different perspective. We were doing fluent writing first. That's where Anthony comes up. That's the very first part of the program. The child goes up to the board and writes words fast and smart. Those are words we call known words, words that they can use in reading and words that they use in writing. So they're in charge of those words. The next part of the lesson you saw, well, actually it's not a part of the lesson. It was just Anthony returned his homework to me, and that homework consisted of a sentence or a story that he created for me the day before, and then what I did was I took that story and I cut it apart, and then he needed to take that home, put it back together again on a sheet of paper and illustrate it and return it to me and read it to me. And what that does is it fosters Anthony searching about visual cues in order to be able to put that sentence or story back together again. The next part was familiar rereading. That's always the next part of the lesson, where a child has an array of books that they choose from, and those are stories that they've read over and over again, words that are stories that they're fluent in, they feel comfortable with, they can add some expression, have a different tone in their voice, and then what I will do is ask Anthony to maybe locate a word for me that he knows, praise him for his smooth reading that sounds just like talking, you know, praise his expression, and then when I continue to do that, then he sees himself as a very smooth reader, and he knows what a good, smooth reader sounds like, a fluent reader sounds like with phrasing. So.
Very impressive.
Okay, you're going to have to help me remember the part. It was kind of interesting to watch, like Kim said, a different perspective on a lesson, so help me remember what we saw with Kurt. Initially, though, I think, too, that was, he came in and wrote some words he knew. I think I asked if he had learned any new words lately in his classroom to help the curious. And oftentimes they'll come in from their first grade classroom and say, oh, I learned a new word, or I learned a new word today. Sometimes I'll ask if they've learned a new word today. But again, that's a quick, fluent time to write words they know that they can use as a reader and then as a writer also. Then Kurt was doing some familiar rereading on the book about the hog bucket. That had been a book he had read the previous day. He had done, I believe I praised some expression too. By the time he had read that book, probably in his classroom earlier that day too, he had read it a couple of times and was totally in control and independent with that book, which is what we want to see during that time of the lesson. Okay, then another segment I think we saw was during the writing time of the lesson, which is a good solid 10 minutes. The reading recovery lesson, by the way, is kind of broken down beginning with about 10 minutes to read, then a 10-minute segment in the middle of the lesson to write, and then 10 minutes again toward the end of the lesson with a new book. And so we saw a little bit of his writing time. What you saw was he was working on writing the word pig.
In the boxes, right?
Yeah, in the boxes. And the boxes give us structure to help him hear the sounds that are in the words, which he's real comfortable and quick with now. And so he was pushing his finger up. There were 3 sounds to hear in the word pig, and he was pushing his finger up to help himself hear the sounds that were in that word. And then I think that was that part. Was there another part maybe I've missed?
I would just like to add, too, it's our job as a reading recovery teacher to be in control of knowing what the student knows. We keep a writing vocabulary chart, and in case you're wondering why we prompt, what have you learned any new words in your classroom? And if they come in and have learned a new word, we keep track of that. We act sometimes as the child's memory, and if they come across that word or in writing or in reading, then we can tell them, you know that word, and often that's just enough to help them out, So it's our job as a reading recovery teacher to know everything that the child knows and what's going on in the classroom, and to continually link it throughout our reading recovery lesson.
It's very, very impressive. I know I've said it before, but it's very impressive. What are the future plans for reading recovery?
Reading recovery has been implemented over time in Midland County, and I think our challenge now is to get better at our good work. We've come to understand what it means to be a reading recovery teacher and to help reading recovery students, and our task is to do that job as well as we can and better each year, so we can help all the students who may be at need, and we can also be efficient and effective for the schools that we're operating in.
Okay. Do you have any future plans for the reading recovery program that you two are working in right now with your students?
Yeah, our goal, or the goal of every reading recovery teacher, is to help that child accelerate to the point where he's not able, or where he's able to then discontinue from the program. When that child is independent and strategic at grade level or his classroom average, and independent, able to do all those things by himself without the prompt from an adult sitting next to him, he's able to then discontinue him and not come to reading recovery lessons anymore. So that's kind of like the goal we have in our head all the time, is to plan to have that child out of the program at some point, always as quickly as we can.
And that will vary. Could be 30 lessons, 60 lessons, 40 lessons, 65 lessons. It just depends on the student.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming down again. After these important messages, created by our own communication crew in our video communications class, Zoom will take a look at high school proficiency testing. Please stay with us.
It's up to you. 53,000 pints of blood are needed each day to save lives.
Pretty peaceful, isn't it? We had better get used to it. Because if you choose to drink and drive, you could be hearing a lot of it.
They're empty. Hold on a second. Here, honey. Here, play with this. Play with this. Okay. Matthew, age 1. Matthew, age 13. So he had to call someone and find your number. It's so cool. What? He just likes me? Yeah, you know what? You're pretty enough to go out there. Oh my gosh, we're late. Crap. How come I'm not pretty?
Please remember, it's not what's on the outside, but what's on the inside that counts.
Hi, I'm Amy Nadolski, your host for this segment of Zoom In on the Schools. Here with us today we have Linda Klein, Midland Public School teacher consultant on the proficiency test. Linda, how are these standards set for the test?
The standards were set this summer by a group of teachers from around the state working with representatives from the State Department of Education. They spent a lot of time, I believe during the month of July, actually looking at the tests that had been scored to that point to see how students worked. And then they set some standards that they thought could be fairly applied to the rest of the state.
Do you think it's, like you just said, fair to standardize a test for all of Michigan?
Yes, this is an extension of the Michigan Educational Assessment Program. The high school proficiency tests have replaced those old tests, and we've always had standards that have applied everywhere so that anyone looking at those knows that if a student has attained a particular score, it means the same thing regardless of where they went to school.
How do you feel considering some of the students in Michigan aren't doing very well on this test?
Well, this is a first year for the test, and our experience in the past has always been first years are difficult because they're new to everyone. The students taking them, particularly this year, these are tests that no one really has had any experience with. They're a very different type of format. We don't have the multiple choice. There was a lot of writing, even in subjects like math and science. After that, as teachers, we get better at knowing what we need to do to help students prepare, and students have some time to practice. I think it's important to note that 5th and 8th graders had some similar tests this year, so by the time they're juniors, this won't be new to them. This was a tough year, though.
How long do you think it will take until the proficiency test actually does affect the students' ability to get into the colleges or the professions of their test?
With colleges, I'm not certain. Right now, they're not using the proficiency test, which is a good idea since it is brand new, and this was the first year with it. I do know that in some other states that have similar tests, their colleges do ultimately use it. I don't think there's a plan right now in Michigan for that to happen. However, employers will probably use it a little bit sooner. The State Chamber of Commerce has an initiative underway where they hope to reach every employer in the entire state and let them know what the various endorsements mean, so that within 5 years, employers should know that and will start asking questions, and they will know that if you graduated in 1997, you would have had these endorsements. In another year, you might have had some other endorsements.
Well, we asked some of the students in our schools what they thought of the proficiency test. Let's hear what they have to say.
Do you think that this is a good test to take for students?
I don't think so, because there are people that I know that are really smart, like in science or whatever, that didn't pass it, but they're going to major in something to do with science, and colleges don't really care.
Tom, we were wondering what you think of the proficiency test.
That was a big waste of my time. I missed like 2 or 3 days worth of classwork, and then I think it's just a big ton of the school just didn't waste their time.
Dan is going to be taking the proficiency test this spring. Dan, how do you feel about taking this test?
I don't really see why we have to do it because, my brothers, they never had to do it, and they both have good jobs, so I don't think there's no need that we have to.
Are you afraid of taking the test? Do you think it'll be difficult?
Well, from what I've heard, a lot of people didn't do well on it, even our school, and we did better than most schools, so yeah, I'm afraid of it. I want to get the state-endorsed diploma, but if on average most people don't do it, I'm afraid that'll be one of the average ones.
And I really feel that the proficiency tests are a fair test. I think they definitely have been designed to test whether or not students have a curriculum that they should have had in the high school years. And I think it also is a test that will tell whether or not they are proficient in the areas that they are being asked to take the test in. So generally, I'm fairly favorable about the proficiency test. I think they have been designed with a lot of care from teachers across the state of Michigan.
So you do think it's fair then to standardize a test for the whole state of Michigan?
I think it's fair. I think the problem comes in with the time crunch that we have right now as far as having to administer a test. They are lengthy, as you know. You've gone through them. And you know that basically it takes almost 4 half days, out of our normal school schedule. And the problem that we have here as an educational institution is the fact that we have normal classes that are going on, and during that time trying to fit those tests and so forth into a normal school schedule is really difficult.
You went to talk to any of the college reps. Did they mention anything about the proficiency test?
No, they don't. I don't believe the colleges or any employers know about the proficiency test or even care yet.
Do you think that the proficiency test is a good thing for students to take?
Yeah, I say why not, because if you're not proficient, then you're like going to maybe be looked down on in a couple years, but if you can't be any harm if you are, because you're going to be proficient, everyone's going to know it, and then it's not going to be a bad thing if you are.
This is Diana Bolander, a senior here at Midland High School. Diana took the proficiency test last spring. Diana, what do you think of this test?
I think the proficiency test is a good idea, but it could use some changes.
Like what? What type of changes?
I think it really should be evaluated, especially in the writing section, because different people write in different styles, and there were discrepancies in the way it was graded. Like, people in Iowa were like taken pretty much off the street to grade it, and that's wrong.
Do you think that it's fair to standardize one test for all of Michigan?
I think there should be some standard that everyone can be tested by, because the schools are so different that it's good to know where everyone is, at what level is. But since the schools are at all different levels and they teach different things, that maybe it should be a little different for each area.
Mr. Dana, what do you think of students taking the proficiency test?
I think the idea is good. I think that a standardized test like that to improve competency is a good thing to do. I just question the amount of time that we're missing out of class. I also think that not enough people understand or are ready to use the proficiency test. So the meaning of them is kind of diluted a little bit by people not understanding what they're all about.
Well, you now know some of the concerns of our students and teachers. How long do you think it will take for the colleges to recognize the proficiency test? You mentioned earlier that employers, it would probably be about 5 years.
I'm not sure about the colleges. As I mentioned, there are other states that are using them, and I think it would be wise for the colleges to let the program settle down for a couple of years, have everyone with some experience with it before they begin to consider it. And as far as I know, there isn't anybody right now that's asking for proficiency endorsements.
Do you know if this test is going to change in the future, and how will it change?
Well, the first change will be this year when the tests are moved from March until January, or late January, early February. Last year, the juniors took the test in early to mid-March, which gave them another couple of years or a couple of months of schooling behind them. This year it'll be moved up a little bit earlier. The reasoning for that is to try to get everything back before the end of the school year, because some seniors will be retesting, and they really do need to know whether they're going to have their endorsements before they graduate. Then in the long run, there will be a change in 1999 when another test is added. There will be a social studies piece, and that will include 4 sections on government, economics, U.S. history, some geography, some world issues. And then probably a couple of years after that, we'll be back into what's an ordinary test revision process. These tests are revised probably every 5 to 10 years, and by then we will have had enough experience that we'll be into revision, so we can't get too comfortable with these.
With adding a social study test, then that will also add time onto the test, correct?
Absolutely.
How do you feel about most of the other students missing out in their regular class periods to take this test?
Well, it's a real goal, I think, to have students pass their test on their first time, because it is a very time-consuming process, and it does require that students miss a lot of time out of their regular instruction. If that only happens once, that's not so bad if we know that it's certifying that a student really has some competencies. Where it causes problems is if a student has to take another section of the test again, or perhaps the whole test, and then a second time and a third time. That can really add up and amount to missing whole weeks of school before graduation. So as teachers, our job is to make sure that our students are prepared and can pass it on the first time.
So naturally, overall, you think that this test is worthwhile?
It is. It's tough for us because it is so new, but in the long run, I think it's good, and students who did pass it can feel very, very proud of what they've learned, and those who are in the process need to know that, as the scoring stated, it's novice or not yet novice. It's not meant to be a final indication of what you do know or what you can know.
Students have to take this test?
Well, as schools, we have to make the test available to all of our students. We are expected to test every student who is a junior or with the other MEP test at that grade level. And the only way that a student cannot be tested is if their parent signs a form that says that they don't want their student to take the test. Parents don't have to give us any reason. They just come in and they say, I don't care to have my child take this test, and that's fine. And then we have to find something else for those students to do during the testing time.
If a student doesn't do well in a section of the test, do they have to take the whole test over again?
No, absolutely not. The 4 sections of the test all stand alone. There's the reading, the writing, the mathematics, and the science. And the reading and the writing are combined for the communication arts endorsement. But the student only has to retest on those sections where they didn't reach the proficient level. So if a student was proficient in everything, perhaps except reading, it's only the reading test that they have to retake, and that's much shorter than having to retest on all of the other sections.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Linda, and I think you did clear up some of our questions on proficiency tests. That concludes this month's program for Zoom In on Schools. I'm Amy Nadolski for Midland Public Schools Video Communications. Thank you again, and Zoom In next month.
Zoom in. Yeah, zoom in. On the school, yeah. This is a show about our schools and what's going on inside. Come on and have yourself a seat. That's entertainment.